Hello there, welcome to another mini ELL teaching PD, especially for remote learning. This one is going to be a little bit longer than normal, but it won't be more than 7 minutes, and I promise it will be worth it. This is how to help your English learners respond to your questions when you're teaching remotely, and I'm willing to bet that this is a challenge not just with your English learners, but pretty much with everyone. So I want to look at some examples from Wit and Wisdom. We're looking at an actual example of a Nearpod slide and an actual workbook page that students have. Now, I'm not picking on this grade level by any means. There are actually a lot of strong things here that I want us to look at, but I wanted some concrete examples so that you're able to cross-apply this to varying lessons in Wit and Wisdom. So almost all the Wit and Wisdom texts start with a lesson looking at what do you notice and wonder about the book, illustration, or cover. So again, we're going to look at this slide and this workbook page. And I want you to notice what is already strong when we consider English learners when looking at these two examples. Now you might notice that on the Nearpod slide, next to the question, it includes the actual cover that we've been discussing so that students don't have to remember what they saw and answer the question. They can actively look while mentally processing this question. That's very important, and I love that. Also, the vocabulary in the question that the teacher asks verbally, that's on the slide, that's in their notebook, all is consistent. That's also very important, very strong. In the actual workbook, there are synonyms or explanations of what those vocabulary term means. That's very important. So notice also means to see or observe. That to wonder means to ask questions. I know I'm talking fast, guys. I'm sorry. I just want to get through this in less than 7 minutes. And in their workbook, it includes these visuals for what that means. And I've seen teachers actually using actions to support this as well. Like, what do you notice and what do you wonder? That's excellent. So keep on doing those things. Nevertheless, despite all of those supports, this is still really difficult vocabulary and a difficult mental process for students to engage in, especially for language learners. Notice and wonder are, as you know, the whole reason that you use these actions and that these are supported is because it's not actually the easiest vocabulary in the world. It's still very academic. So students, to respond to this question, they have to know what the vocabulary word means intellectually. They have to process the meaning while putting it together with the visual that they're looking at. Then they have to form a thought in response to the question. Then they have to put the thought into a sentence, and then they have to write that sentence. And not only do they have to do that for notice, they also have to do it for wonder. And that the way that the question is posed, what do you notice and wonder, they have to do that parallel process for both words at the same time, rather than let's just do it for notice first, and let's just do it for wonder next. This is a lot for any student. So now I've made this hypothetical slide that might directly follow the slide that we just looked at that had the question there next to the book cover. So take a moment, think about how this slide provides additional supports to English learners to help them actually respond to that question in a way that you can receive it and assess their comprehension. So you may notice that I've still included the cover that we're talking about. That was something strong from before. We want to keep it. I've included a photo of the actual workbook so that students retain that visual and that synonym and that vocabulary. And this helps them know where they're actually supposed to be writing in their student workbook. Additionally, I provided 3 sentence starters using 3 different levels of vocabulary. The most basic, I have I see, which is used here. I have I notice, which is the main word that they're going to be hearing, and I observe, which is used here. So I'm keeping all the language consistent, but it's on varying levels of rigor so that students can find their own access point to understand, oh, that's what that vocabulary means. That's what I'm going to process now. And the sentence stem actually helps me start that thought in my brain and put it in a sentence. And now when I'm writing it down, I have that support as well, so that all of the majority of my mental energy on the actual writing of the words can be focused on my response as opposed to the sentence starter. So it's kind of an on-ramp onto their learning. If we look at wonder, this might be my next slide. It's the same thing. I've used the visual from the workbook, the visual from the cover of the book, and I could have included all of the question words here, but more than 3 sentence starters will stop being helpful and start to be overwhelming. So I've chosen the 3 question words that I think are the most critical when we're wondering about this particular photo. But you would use your own discretion when considering the specific text or illustration that you were looking at in your lesson. So in all, my tip is that you provide with your questions 1 to 3 sentence stems of varying levels of vocabulary to support students' understanding of the question and their verbal and written response to that question. You might include those sentence starters on the same slide as the question if there's room. In my case, there really wasn't room, so I had to create an additional slide for the notice and yet an additional slide for the wonder. And once you have at-home dot cameras that you can set up so that students can actually see what you're writing as you're writing it, you might even model those sentence starters in the actual workbook or a notebook or a blank piece of paper as well. That is it for today. I hope that I didn't talk too fast, and I hope that it was helpful. I will see you next time. This was just part 1 because there are many strategies we can use to help language learners respond to our questions.